Hey, it's Rachel Cooke, your modern mentor. I'm the founder of Lead Above Noise, a firm specializing in retaining, engaging, and developing talent. And today, we're going to talk about a concept called lifelong learning. It's kind of a buzzy phrase that's making the rounds at work. But what it is, how it differs from regular old learning, and how we do it well, these are the questions. So let's do some answers. The mental highlight reel of my college years is pretty chock full of some amazing stuff. There's lifelong friends, there's a cappella performances, and yes, my nickname was Snappy, and there's a semester abroad. But you know what does not make that reel? That would be the freshman level statistics class I had to take. Because stats and I do not see eye to eye, but that is totally okay, because I'm not a capital R researcher. But while I do steer clear of spreadsheets and data sets, there's a lot that I can and regularly do with a pen and the back of a napkin. My business affords me the privilege of working with a pretty wide variety of leaders. I play in different industries, I work with different functions and levels, and I have made some very statistically not valid observations that I will stand by until the end. And one of them is this. My clients who truly embody lifelong learning are the leaders with the strongest performance, hands down. They get the best results, they have the strongest followership, and they are the ones who win at innovation and employee experience and customer delight. If you haven't heard the phrase lifelong learning yet, you will soon. It's become one of those buzzy phrases that so many of us have already kind of started to tune out. But today, I'd love to make the case for why it matters, like for real, and how you can commit to your own lifelong learning journey. Let's start with what lifelong learning actually is. So for me, learning is a thing that you do in service of building the skills and competence to do something new. It's about dialing up what you know. But lifelong learning is more of a way of being and believing. It has no beginning or end, but it's really an ongoing commitment to always staying open and curious and humble and flexible. It's a way of approaching life and work so that you're never there and you're always striving to grow and pivot and expand. It's about dialing up how you think, how you operate. Lifelong learners don't typically think of learning as an expenditure of time, but as an investment in their own future success. And those who practice it most effectively, they really get that. They make space for and they prioritize learning, and not just in the classroom, but in a whole bunch of different ways. So if you're in, and I hope you're in, then let's talk about some strategies you can use to lean fully into lifelong learning. First, you can regularly scan your surroundings. When I speak at events about how to lead through change, I'll often reference brands like Kodak and Polaroid and Blockbuster. And yeah, I realize you may not even be old enough to recognize all of these, but take my word. Each of these companies had achieved extraordinary success. They were the gold standards of their industries. They became so comfortable and self-satisfied that they kind of stopped paying attention. And ultimately, digital cameras and streaming TV took them down. Lifelong learning begins with the recognition that success is fleeting, and we should never stop paying attention to what's happening around us. At the individual level, maybe you're the best copywriter on your team. But are you paying attention to the trends in AI? Do you maybe need to broaden your skill set in order to stay relevant? Or maybe your team manages a product that your customers are raving about. But do you have an eye on what your competitors may be cooking up? Listen, you'll never have access to all the information you need, but by paying attention to the cues around you, you'll be on the early side of spotting trends. And that makes you pretty invaluable. Next, be a broad consumer. Lifelong learning means learning every day, but this doesn't have to mean sitting in a classroom. The key is to be broad in your view of when and how learning is happening. Formal learning is great. Training programs, online courses, TED Talks, and podcasts. Hey, I do love a good podcast. These can all make us better. But they take time, and we may not have that time every day. So think more broadly about sources of insight and information. There's news, however you choose to consume it. There's feedback from your boss. There's chatter around the water cooler. There's trending hashtags and comments in meetings, and honestly, even silence can be a great teacher. When I pose a question in a leadership meeting that leaves participants speechless, I stay there for a moment. Whether I've struck a nerve or uncovered the tension or raised an unfamiliar issue, silence always teaches me that there's some insight here, so don't move on yet. So your turn. What are the sources of insight and information that you're swimming in every day that you're not even seeing as your teachers? Be broad and mindful, and you'll find that learning is available to you nearly everywhere. Next, balance consumption with action. Learning is an enabler of growth until it becomes an obstacle. I know, that was like a little bit of a Yoda thing to say, but this has kind of been a game changer for me. So back to that mental college reel, I am a full-on learning lover. I loved the world of sitting in classes all day. And for some people like me, learning can almost be addictive. But lifelong learning isn't just about collecting facts and data. It's about doing something with the information you're collecting. In the early days of running my business, I got busy consuming everything I could find on strategy, sales, and marketing. And then one day I realized I had filled up an entire notebook of things that I could do. I just forgot to be doing them along the way. I had to commit to balancing learning with doing, so I started scheduling experiments to try in my calendar, seeing what worked and what didn't. And I didn't let myself start consuming again until I'd leaned into execution. Does this resonate for you? How many ideas have you consumed since you last put one into practice? Start with 10 minutes a week. Tweak an email or reformat a spreadsheet. Switch up your morning and afternoon activities or ask a fresh question in a meeting. Experiments can be small. They just have to be. And finally, start a trend. Ultimately, the most successful lifelong learners are those who live in an ecosystem of like-minded people. So as you journey, pull your friends and colleagues into that spin with you. Be the giver of feedback, the bringer of compelling articles, the tinkerer, the experimenter, the facilitator of reflection on your team. And most critically, point out how each of these things is making you better, stronger, more creative, and impactful. Label these things as learning. The more you can engage others in the journey with you, not by preaching, but by sharing your own enthusiasm for being pushed and grown, the more you'll find yourself in a community of lifelong learners. And as Jim Rohn once famously said, you are the average of the 5 people you spend the most time with. Join me next week for another great episode. Until then, visit my website at leadabovenoise.com if your organization is looking to dial up its employee experience or deliver some leadership development that activates change. You can follow Modern Mentor on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you listen to podcasts. Find and follow me on LinkedIn. Thanks so much for listening and have a successful week. Modern Mentor is a quick and dirty tips podcast. It's audio engineered by Dan Farabend with script editing by Adam Cecil. Our podcast and advertising operations specialist is Morgan Christensen. Our digital operations specialist is Holly Hutchings. Our marketing and publicity assistant is Davina Tomlin. And our intern is Cameron Lacey.